So, welcome again to another podcast of the Subtropical Gardening magazine. My name is Paul Plant, horticulturist and radio presenter for over 30 years. And after doing radio for so many years, I've decided to do this on YouTube as a personal endeavor, but also to get the information directly to the people who are interested, whether they be in Australia, locally, or international. That's perfectly fine. The information is still relevant. And basically, I'll be doing a little bit like how I've done it on the radio program, and I'll work with that process. The thing about gardening at this time of the year, so here in southeast Queensland, it's basically autumn. We've just finished summer. We're still going through a lot of the wet. We've still got rainfall almost every single weekend. The rainfall this particular year has been incredibly high, and I'll probably try to get the data for next week so I have more relevant information for you all. Um, but basically, I've been waiting for it to be clear on the weekend. I need to mow the lawn and control the bugs. Plants like the Hoyas, which I'm going to be featuring today, I'm constantly checking them every single week for caterpillars, which are chewing away at the new growth, which is incredibly frustrating because my collection is suffering due to this particular problem. Yeah, the caterpillars are a little bit bad at this time of the year. And I know with a lot of other gardeners, they're trying to grow their veggies. They're changing from what is the summer tropical species, the ones that do really well in the heat, and converting them over to the cooler temperate plants. Those that like to grow during the cooler winter period, they tend to be more of the things like cabbages and broccoli and all of those things. I truthfully tend to focus more on the tropical Asian vegetable culture rather than the European traditional veggies. I also love my natives and I love the ornamental plants that are suitable for my climate. And this is what I try to promote and encourage people to grow. Plants suitable for the climate, plants suitable for your soil, for your rainfall, for your temperatures. All of those things are variables and are very, very important in order to create a really good garden. Some plants might fail. Some plants, it's trial and error. We often go to a garden center and see plants. We fall in love with them as we see them in the garden center, take them home, and then try to figure out where we're going to plant them. I mean, sometimes they fail, sometimes they succeed, but it is a learning curve. I myself, I've propagated so many plants, way too many, and some fail and some succeed. Some I give away, some I sell. And I think if, as gardeners, if we can do that, we propagate plants, some we give away, some we sell, we foster the love for gardening with other gardeners. Now, with that in mind, one of the plants I absolutely love are Hoyas. Now, I have no memory as to when I started growing Hoyas. I think it was probably just finding someone growing the native Australian species, which is Hoya australis, um, in a garden, kind of fell in love with it. And then I saw the pink one, which is Hoya carnosa, fell in love with that one. And then I left them alone for 20 years. I didn't grow them. I wasn't fascinated with them. But I think due to COVID, a lot of people found love in plants that they had once lost. And hence my interest was inspired once again to look more in towards it. So hence I grow a lot of the variegated ones, both this particular one here and which I'll bring closer into the camera soon, and also the one at the back just here, which is a different species. Um, that one's Carnosa. This one's Australis variegated. And I'll talk about each one of those, but also the overall care that I do for Hoyas. Now, first off, let's start at the beginning, which is propagating. So, propagating Hoyas are incredibly simple. The thing about Hoyas, and I'll grab this one close to me, see if I can find a shoot right here. So, these new shoots here, the truth is, do not buy a Hoya from someone who is just going to give you one node. It may work, it may not work, but there are a lot of people on the internet who are selling Hoyas with a single node. Increase your chances of success by ensuring you have two nodes. So the internode is the section between two nodes. The node is where the leaves are attached to the stem. So between two nodes, as you can see here, if this was cut just beneath the node, and those lower leaves could be left on, but I would personally cut them off. So I would cut it here about half a centimeter to 1 centimeter below, let it heal, which means leaving it in shade, not in the potting mix or not in water for at least 24 hours. That means the plant naturally uses the white sap to heal itself. You won't need hormones. You will not need any of those products. So leave it for 24 hours, then pot it into a well-drained potting mix or a propagating mix or a perlite and peat mix, very high in perlite. So at least the lower component beneath the low node and even slightly above it is under the potting mix. Now this part which is above will shoot, and probably in the second year, this part down here will shoot from underneath the ground as well. But always get at least 2 nodes if you are buying online or propagating yourself. Now from that, I kind of started with a couple of cuttings from one plant. Then I grew more and more and more, and it grew, and they basically one plant almost took over part of the garden. Um, but that was the Australis. That's our native one. It grows really well here in the local area. It's a great plant to start with. Plain green leaves, pure white flowers, beautiful scent. Very attracted to nectar-seeking critters and wildlife and insects, of course. But after a while, yeah, it's the same white flower, the same foliage. You tend to look for something a little bit more interesting. So all the varieties, all the species from overseas became available. The variegated ones became very popular. My favorites, obviously, this is one of them. Basically, it has pink flushes. I'll turn it around. Hopefully, you can see that a little bit pink. And then it's just this beautiful mottled effect of foliage leaves. So this one is the Australis. Let me confirm. Yes, this is the Australis. Um, and I just love the fact that I have the benefit of the foliage, and when it does flower, it has the white flowers. This one back here is a variegated Hoya carnosa, and again, it has pink flowers, but the variegation is very bold, very striking, but it has more of a pointed leaf to it. So I'm going to leave it there for the time being. Um, Now, some of the general care, I grow all of mine in hanging baskets. I find that the majority of them look really good hanging up. And if I can find the hook somewhere back here, no, can't find it, sorry. Um, my balcony, I have, I think on one side, 8 on one balcony hanging up, and on the other side, 13 hanging up on the other balcony. So my house has got 2 balconies on either side. And that's a really good way to grow them. Whenever the branches grow too long, I twist it around, I wind it back in so it's nice and bulky and round. I'll just lift this up to show you. That's basically it in a hanging basket. And occasionally I'll spin it around so it gets more balanced growth as it actually grows around and more of it is exposed to the sunlight. But as you say, I think it's a beautiful specimen, and I hope you agree with that as well. All the patterns of the leaves, as you can see, beautiful, and that new growth there. Um, I've kept these in the pots for at least 2 years. That is a small hanging basket. It's around about, I think it's about 100 and I should get a calculate a rule. It's about 150 centimeters, 150 millimeters, which is 15 centimeters wide. The potting mix I used in here is a combination of standard potting mix, koi fiber and perlite, and that is to keep it light and fluffy but also retain the moisture. So during the summer period, if it doesn't rain, it's under a balcony, which means I have to water it. They will get water at least once a week. During winter, it's once a month actually. So I cut it really back because that is what our natural rainfall here is in southeast Queensland. Virtually no rainfall during winter, and then some in a little bit in early spring, and most of it is in summer and in autumn. And they tend to do really, really well. In terms of fertilizer, I do like to give it fertilizer at least twice a year, and that is usually pelletized. And I'll try to boost it up a little bit as well with some seaweed solution and fish emulsion, and maybe also some bloom booster to encourage better flowers for the next season. Flowering, a very secret important point with flowers with Hoyas. Do not cut off the flower stalks, the little tiny stubs that you see. If they look unsightly, please leave them there. They flower every single year from the same stub. So more of those little stubs you see are called peduncles. The more you keep them, the more flowers you will get every successive year. So please keep them on. Don't cut them off. One of the key secrets to remember with these particular Hoyas. The other thing is important is sunlight. So some varieties do need more light than others. I find that really bright light gets the best growth and also gets the best flowering. The moment you start giving them too much shade, the foliage looks good, but they don't flower very well. So you have to decide upon that. Humidity is an interesting thing, is that I personally find that they love humidity. The vast majority I grow do. Some varieties, including some of the Australian natives, do like a drier situation. So do a little bit of research regarding the species you're growing, and that should provide you with a little bit more insight in terms of frequency for watering. It is live. Sorry about that. Hmm. One of the interesting things I found, hmm, excuse me, one of the interesting things I found this year because of all the rainfall is the hoys in the hanging baskets, the ones that faced the house, which were more protected, tended to produce far more aerial roots. And this one isn't too bad. It was exposed to far more light. The ones on the northern side of the house, which for some reason get less light, bizarre situation there. Um, the aerial roots have gone ballistic. Some of them are easy 5 centimeters or longer, and virtually the whole stem between the leaves are all aerial roots. And I think it's just the result of high humidity has stimulated all of these aerial roots, thinking it's in perfect propagation situation. And on that point, another fascinating thing to remember is Hoyas, when they're not climbing amongst trees, which is their natural habitat, they will crawl along the ground and make the perfect ground cover. So if you're looking for an interesting ground cover for your property and it's a bit shady and it's a little bit moist, Hoyas are wonderful. I've got one Hoya in part of the yard, which is a Hoya carnosa, which has just gone ballistic as a ground cover, and I have to quite often pull the leaders, the stems back to keep them within the garden bed. But I've seen them in the wild, up at Springbrook, growing along the ground, over the cliffs and up trees. I've seen them over at Gari Island, also on the ground, not up trees, but on the ground, growing through the leaf fall from other trees. They're incredible hardy plants. So consider them also as a ground cover in your garden if you want to try that as another option. So as they grow along the ground, they will root, constantly root as they grow. So they basically make the perfect layering plant. To propagate those, you just kind of pull up a little bit, cut them off at the ground, and then you can, that piece that you've got, you can plant into a pot. It comes already established with roots. So a nice, easy way to propagate those particular plants. In fact, if I use that as a ground cover, I'd probably have a couple of hundred by the end of the year. It's so vigorous. And definitely worth every single bit of money I spent on that when I first bought it. Very happy with how it's been growing. Another thing that I'm aware of is caterpillars here in Southeast Queensland. We get a lot of caterpillars that like to lay eggs on the underside of the leaves. So I'm constantly looking at these once a week to see if I can capture the baby caterpillars and get rid of them off the particular plant. I have some native Hoya australis which are constantly being eaten, which is a bit of a fight between me and the caterpillars. I love to see butterflies in the yard, but I don't want them eating my Hoyas. So that's one of the other key things that I am aware of. So obviously, I have the option to spray, but I'd rather not spray these particular plants. I'd rather hand pluck the caterpillars off them. Yes, it's more hours. Yes, it's more time, but it's also me tendering the plants, me nurturing these plants so that I can get the best effect, whether it's foliage or flowers, obviously flowers, but I do like the foliage of this particular one. Now, there's nothing wrong with the plain green ones. The vast majority of mine are plain green. In fact, I've got only 4 which are variegated. The rest which is a lot, are all plain green or speckled leaf, or if it's a pubic calyx, that actually has the speckling leaves on it. So, Hoyas are incredibly diverse. They're a wonderful group of plants. They became very popular during COVID, and that might be how you have started with them. Um, I treat them fairly hard. I often completely forget about watering them during the dry season and then realize, oh, the leaves are a little bit soft, a little bit limp. It's time to water them. And that's how I tend to look after them. I like the fact that in my climate, they are pretty tough plants. I have no hesitation in encouraging people to grow Hoyas in any situation, whether they are living in a unit, whether they are in an apartment, or if they're in a house or on acreage, if they're looking for a ground cover. I do actually suggest to landscapers, why not consider Hoya australis as an option to grow under trees as a ground cover? Yet to get a yes, because quite often they have to fit within certain council guidelines. And, that is another issue. Rarely will you find Hoya australis, the native one, listed by councils as an alternative viable ground cover. They only list it as a climber or as the last minute addition to a list for biosecurity or biodiversity. Sorry about that. It is live. I'm allowed to make mistakes. Um, yeah, so that's my give. That's my take on Hoyas. Is there anything else I need to take? I talked about the propagating media. I talked about the media I grow in the hanging baskets, which are very important. Propagating Hoyas. Where to buy Hoyas? Well, obviously, garden centers. Head to your local garden center, independent garden centers will be able to get some of these varieties in for you. You could go to places like the markets, gardening events. They should also be there. Check online. There's some good specialist places that sell it. But as I said, do not buy them if it's a single node. Please look for two nodes. Facebook is a great place to talk about and to network with other growers of Hoyas. You can also get some of their tips and advice in terms of successes they have had. But in truth, I find them easy. They're extremely low maintenance. Any day, I would recommend anyone to grow a Hoya compared to, say, a fuchsia in a potting mix, in a hanging basket, or begonia. These are easier. Um, rather than an ivy in a hanging basket. Hoyas. Clearly, I like Hoyas. I don't sell Hoyas. I don't market Hoyas. I'm not talking on behalf of a seller for Hoyas. I just find them as a wonderful plant for you to consider. So you've got lots of species. Um, I have mind blank. I should have written them down. I have some Hoyas that have little tiny minuscule leaves, and some that are about that big. Um, yeah, I should have written that down. What I'll do is I'll go back into my YouTube podcast for this particular one and add a bit more information regarding the Hoya cultivars and varieties that I'm growing, which might take a little while I walk around the whole section, take them all down and write them all down, then add them onto the list. Now, that's the Hoya information. Now, something else to consider, generally speaking, for gardeners. Now, we are going into the autumn period. So everyone keeps mentioning, where is it? Mike the cow. Cow clock. That's the tongue. Some people like it. Some people don't. I like it. It's a bit weird. Um, at this time of the year, we are looking at going into the winter period here in Southeast Queensland. So what you need to consider is as time gets cooler, the day lengths get shorter, the nights get longer. Some plants are going through a bit of a change. So a lot of our tropical plants, you need to think about how you're going to look after those. The true tropicals might start showing decline of foliage growth. They'll stop growing. They might even go into semi-dormancy. May not be dying, just semi-dormancy. Just make sure you're aware of those two variables. There's a huge difference between dying and dormancy. So most of the dormancy plants have an undergrown rhizome or tuber or structure that allows them to survive the winter period. Now, here in Southeast Queensland and in the tropics, the winter period is the dry season. So most of those plants die down because of the dry, not because of cold, but because of the dry. It's just coincidence. It's cold and dry at the same time. Now we know this because in some areas where it's winter, if they get water, some of those plants keep their foliage. So that's why we know the actual thing is a dry issue, not a temperature issue. Um, now, sorry, talking about that. So, some plants, as they die down, that is the process of the plants extracting the nutrients, putting it back into their rhizomes or tubers or whatever structure for them to store over the winter period, the dry period, for them to burst into flower in spring and summer. So let the foliage naturally die down. Don't go in with secateurs and cut it all off. It might look bad for a few weeks. Please be patient. Be a good gardener for your plants by encouraging them to extract those nutrients out of the leaves as best as possible. The other thing, some of the other plants, however, come into flower at this time of the year and put on beautiful leaf colorations. So, for example, you've got the cordyline that tend to intensify their leaf color during the late summer, autumn, early winter period. So, right now, this is May. Cordyline are looking beautiful. Another plant, one of my favorites, are the Dombayas, which are from Africa. So they've been flowering. The Dombaya natalensis, also known as Dombaya tiliaceus, has been flowering for the last couple of weeks. I think it's almost 6 weeks now. It's coming towards near its end. However, all of the others are just starting to bud up now, and I'm noticing the buds on mine in the garden. So I've got one which is called Dombaya Cayu, and it's my prime, pristine. It's my feature plant in the yard. It's a when in flower, everyone just goes mind-boggling over impressive how good this particular plant is. And it's probably over 3 meters tall, 3 meters wide. It's big. Um, and the baby buds are just starting to appear on that one, and that will come more into full flower at the start of spring. It's a very long, slow period for it to come into bloom. In fact, I think it's going to start flowering probably by about late July, which is right in the middle of winter, but we'll keep track of that. And when it's in bloom, obviously, I'll feature it here on the live podcast. There are, of course, a lot of other plants throughout southeast Queensland. You're seeing a lot of the Sena or the Cassias are in flower. What else have I been noticing? Some of the wattles have started to flower. Some species flower in late summer, some in in winter, and some in spring. Again, different plants flower at different times. For the last, say, 6, 8 weeks, we've been seeing the golden pender in full bloom. So that is Xanthostomum chrysanthus. And be aware there are different species and forms or cultivars of this particular plant. So the normal natural big tree species, which is grown by seed, is the golden pender, Xanthostomum chrysanthus. There's also a smaller dwarf form known as Expo Gold, also marketed as Fairhill Gold. Now that grows round about 4 meters high, but it's more like a thick, bushy plant to a small tree. Really good for pruning and hedging into a boundary if you've got a large property, or your feature tree if you have a small yard. This is absolutely beautiful. Now, they've been flowering also for the last couple of weeks, and they have actually a bigger flower and a closer internode, the section between the nodes, which makes it more compact and it looks far better than the actual original species, but smaller, a better size for the yard. If you want to go even smaller, you change over to a different species, which is known as the cream dancer, also known as the little pender, botanically known as Xanthostomum verticillata, and that one has obviously a cream flower, smaller foliage, and about 2 meters in height and about 2 to 3 meters in wide. So a good hedging plant. I've seen that used as a hedge throughout Cairns, so it's a really good one for that purpose. Go a little bit smaller again. You've got Xanthostomum chrysanthus, little Goldie. So that gets the yellow flower, smaller growing plant. I have seen it to 2 meters high, but in truth, prune it down and it looks far better if it's around about that 1 to 1.5 meters height. Left alone, it becomes a bit open and sparse. I still like it. And I think it could potentially make a very small tree for a courtyard, but I've yet to see it left alone in its natural form. So if anyone knows of one, please tell me. I'd love to see it and photograph it so I have a record of that particular plant. And then added to that, you've got next two variegated forms as well. So one has, what is it, green on the outside with yellow in the middle, and the other has yellow on the outside with green in the middle. And I cannot remember the name of those cultivars. And they're both trees. So you do have options available to you when it comes to the golden pender. The varieties are out there in the market for you to track them down. Obviously, then you've got a whole range of more ornamental plants. You've got things like the tibucinas tend to flower mostly in spring, but some of them are still flowering now. The dwarfer ones like jewels and jazzies and illusions tend to flower for a very, very, very long period. So check some of those out. If you head to your garden center, you will find more plants that will be suitable for your garden wherever you live, that will suit your climate and your soil. Please ask the staff who are there. They are there to give you advice and direct you in the right direction. I personally know that some of the hardware stores don't have staff who know their horticultural knowledge. They might know how to show you the plant that they want to sell or that they need to sell. Um, but going to an independent retail garden center is your best source of the local knowledge. I also know here in Australia, we lack local publications, information in print. Gardening Australia has most of the information not relevant to here in Southeast Queensland. Only a very small proportion is actually relevant. Um, there used to be a magazine which I was associated with. That's now gone. So moving on, we encourage anyone who is into gardening, please track down local experts or find the topic you are interested in and find local people who are also passionate about that. And for that reason, I love people joining garden clubs. It doesn't matter what age you are, you will find the information that you are seeking. And the great thing about that is that quite often they have plant sales, incredibly, I was going to say filthy cheap prices, worth buying plants from those particular communities and those garden club people. And so where I'm currently living, there's I think an orchid show on this particular weekend. So if you're going to that, enjoy it. But this is also it's orchids are bizarre. Almost every time of the year, you will find an orchid society having an orchid show because you get some that flower in spring, some in autumn, and yeah, they're pretty plants, and I do have a fair few here too, but I tend to grow the really tough ones where I don't have to look after them. But that said, I do grow the Dendrobium speciosum, and I have to have a constant fight battle with the Dendrobium beetle that likes to devour the flowers and mutilate all the leaves. That's another pest I have here locally, let alone all the other pests I have that eat my native plants. So, see, Hoya australis native has pests. Native king orchid has pests. My native Elaeocarpus yamundii, one of the most popular trees used by councils, has pests. And usually once a year it's completely defoliated because some of the local sawflower caterpillars chew every single leaf off the entire tree, and I'm left with a stick. But give it 4 to 5 weeks and it's in growth again, so that really doesn't bother me. It's a little bit frustrating for a short period, but as a gardener, you get over it. I get over it because I've learned, my option is to head out there with the pesticide, spray everything, or just let nature do its thing. So when it comes to the little Spitfire bugs, or there's a couple of other common names for it, um, if I leave it alone, other birds will eat those caterpillars, or they'll just live their life and mature and then move on, and the plant will recuperate itself. It's a native tree, that's a native pest. They're perfectly fine living together. They adapt to each other. I do not need to jump in with a pesticide to kill them. However, if it was my front property feature plant, and if I had a small yard and I was selling the property, I would definitely probably take a couple of strategies using an horticultural oil-based product to kind of eliminate those particular pests, because it's all about the right look at the time of sale. That was slightly off track, but still gardening related and property valuation. And in the background, that's one of my dogs walking towards me, seeking attention. Yep, almost here, but not quite. Um, the other thing with so I'm going to try and make the podcast every single week. That's my intent. Every Saturday is my objective. It may not happen on a Saturday. It does depend upon what else I have scheduled. And right now, at this time of the morning, I try to do it a little bit earlier, but we'll see how we go in the future. I might have to change the date because as I develop this particular podcast series, I want to integrate more basically guest speakers in, um, possibly going to other locations, bring it into the podcast. So I'm actually at growers' locations, showing you the plants and them showing you the plants as well, not just me. This is basically like a radio studio where I've got the microphone, I'm talking into the microphone, and it's broadcast out to the radio audience. And it's usually just that interaction. Obviously, when it goes live, there is that opportunity to get the phone calls in, but because this is a really new podcast process, I'm trying to get a few up on the bank history first, and then I'll stream through and sort out how to take in the probably not the phone calls, but people will be able to do on my screen. It's over here. Um, your screen, it might be on the opposite side. It's the chat option where people can log in and type in the questions that they might have. So it's much more a communication between yourself and myself so we can discuss certain gardening topics. Because having done radio for 20 plus years, I'm used to people ringing up and just asking questions so I can respond through that method. So we'll see how that goes over due course. And I'm trying to sort out if some of my software I can work on improving my background. But right now, it went live a bit fast before I could do some of the settings. I'll try to improve that for next week or however long it takes. I will be working on this. So my intent with the YouTube podcast series, Subtropical Gardening, is to make little improvements each week so I can get to a point where it is more professional. It provides you with more information. It's also more entertaining. It's not just me all the time. It will give you more information, and having that dialogue with the listeners or the watchers on the YouTube will allow us to kind of grow this podcast series to something a little bit better. So until next time, live. Now on radio, what we have is a silence button. We don't have that here. And what you do is you press the button, you cough, and then you come back again. And the other person who's the producer usually presses another button to put in a little bit of a music. Now I don't have one of those little machines. I might in the future, who knows? But for the time being, I don't. So during the live, I might occasionally cough. I probably will make sure I have water with me next time. And occasionally I might change my background. In other words, I might move to a different location rather than this one location with my silly. Where is she? Where is it? With the silly cow clock. Um, yep, that's it. Okay, folks, thank you for tuning in. And until next week, this is Subtropical Gardening podcast. And my name is Paul Plant, qualified horticulturist, providing you with the information. Cheers for now.